Actually, it feels here in Simferopol, Chris, reasonably calm. You might be able to see some of the Russian self-defense, so-called self-defense volunteers behind me. They're guarding government buildings like this Council of Ministers here in Simferopol. They're down around the parliament here as well. The Russian flag is flying everywhere. We've had big Russian rallies here. There's been a sort of euphoric mood among the Russian population, the majority Russian population here in Crimea. They feel they've already won this referendum. They're absolutely certain it's going to be a landslide tomorrow. And when you talk to them, they talk about it's their dream to rejoin Russia after 60 years, to go back into the Russian Federation. They say they're absolutely delighted to have that opportunity to vote in that referendum. By contrast, the minority population here, the Ukrainians, the Tatars, many of them say this is an illegal, unconstitutional vote. They'll boycott the referendum. All it needs is a simple majority of those who turn out to vote tomorrow between the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the evening to secure the referendum, to win it for Russia. It seems it's likely to be a landslide. We were talking to a returning officer just down the road at a polling station. He said he thought it would be a 90% turnout, and 80% of those who vote, he said, would vote for joining Russia. So no doubt in his mind, and he's an electoral commission official, that it's going to be a huge landslide for Crimea being part of Russia. Assuming it is a big yes vote, or any kind of yes vote, we will almost certainly get international sanctions triggered against Russia from the United States and from the European Union, travel bans and asset freezes on named Russian individuals who've been part of the intervention or allegedly part of the intervention here in Crimea. And just another really escalation of this East-West crisis, the worst crisis in East-West relations since the Cold War. It's going to make things even more difficult. I suppose the next question is, what does President Putin, once he does effectively have Crimea in his pocket, what does he do next? Does he try to secure any of the places in eastern Ukraine that have big Russian populations, cities like Donetsk or Kharkiv, where there's been some violence in the last few days? I think the indications are that he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't send troops into eastern Ukraine, even though he's got troops massed along that border. That would be escalating it much, much further than the situation here in Crimea at the moment. The Russians around here that we've been talking to, I don't think they care about that vote at the UN one little bit. They say the only vote that matters is the vote here tomorrow, the referendum. I think in Moscow, maybe they'll be a bit disappointed that China, that so often does side with Russia at the United Nations, today decided not to abstain. Clearly it wasn't a vote against Russia, but it wasn't a vote in favour of Russia either. So there'll be some diplomatic disappointment there. Russia does look very isolated on the international stage, certainly as a result of that UN vote.